Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Conscious Perspective. I'm your host, Haskins, and you are now tuned in to enable yourself to vibe, to transmit, to resonate at a different frequency, and to see life in a different perspective. A perspective that allows you to fully see what's going on, to know what's going on behind the scenes, to really peel the layers back of what it means to be a human being, and to fully see this reality for what it is. And I call that perspective the conscious perspective. The following is a conversation with Slava Kolpakov, also known as Surya, and hopefully I said both of those names correctly. Slava is the author of the book Threads of Light, which I highly recommend. Threads of Light is a collection of short stories that by Slava himself, and he has a way of explaining very profound topics in a very simple way, in a way that even if you never heard of anything of yogic philosophy, or if you just picked it up for the first time and never did a yoga class or read anything of the Upanishads or the Bhagavad Gita, or if you just want to know something new or just see the life in a new way, Slava's there for you with Threads of Light. Like I said, I highly recommend it. He is a very, very interesting individual, and it was an honor for me to sit down with this guy. I think he's the man, personally. He is a yogi through and through. I don't know him too well, but from the few conversations that we've had, I can tell that this guy is the real deal. And yeah, it was an honor, like I said, speaking to this guy, and hopefully everyone enjoys our conversation, and hopefully you get something out of it. Without further ado, let's get into it.
So it's very interesting. Cannabis is another cannabinoids. There's about 140 different cannabinoids that, again, have been proven to treat like brain cancers, especially in children, in microdoses. We think like cannabis for children, but actually, it kills cancer cells. Specifically THC, not so much CBD, but THC is very effective. CBD usually deals with the pain. By THC, it goes straight to the fastest replicating cells in the body, basically neutralizes them.
That is really interesting, actually. Was that one of the things that was in the documentary that you watched?
Exactly. It actually had several episodes on cannabis, multiple examples, life stories of moms and dads with their kids, and people who were treating their parents, with this, and they were basically stage 4. They were terminal. Reverse, in 2 weeks they're walking again. In 6 months they're still alive. They're getting, basically complete, reversal of the cancer. And all they're doing is just taking cannabis. And of course, it has to be formulated. It has to be, you can't just take any kind of it has to be a very specific formula.
Yeah, it's like an oil, like a concentrated oil.
Concentrated oil, that's the most effective. Yeah. Very interesting.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's it's available, and so I've been watching all these series, and I was just thinking maybe you're kind of trying to do something similar, put together some kind of a conscious perspective. Yeah, it's interesting.
That's exactly what I'm doing, is looking at things such as alternative medicines that can help people that a lot of people don't even know about, and it can come from medicines of the mind, physical ailments, or just spiritual ailments, or whatever it is. It's just to reach a new perspective on life that's something else other than the mainstream.
Exactly. Yeah.
And talking to people like you that actually know about this stuff and dive deep into the knowledge base of this stuff, and hopefully can impact some people.
I don't know if I am not a scholar, so I don't study this kind of like as a professor would, in a college or something, and deliver, memorized lines out of the Gita or the Upanishads. You know, I've read them. You know, some commentaries on them. So, and you know, I've been doing this for a while, so I have some knowledge, but my knowledge is mostly experiential. You know, for me, and this, by the way, you know, over and over you hear this repeated in different scriptures, whether it's the Upanishads or something out of Buddhism. It's all experiential. You know, it has to be, you know, one part, I can't remember which Upanishad it is, but there's one part where Narada, you know, Narada is a sage, mythical figure, who's talking to another sage who's like in a human form, you know, and he says, what is that knowledge by which you can know things that are unknown? You know, what is that knowledge that you can hear that which is unheard of, and that you can see that which is unseen? And he says, you know, I've traveled through all the worlds, and I have read the Vedas, and I have seen snake charming. You know, he kind of gives you a range of everything, but I have not heard of the knowledge that gives you the knowledge of the true self. The knowledge of the self is experiential, but it's not accessed by the mind, right? You're not able to access it, but you can experience it because you're living it, you know. Yes. The self is life, and it's not an object. As you know, we talked about that in the training. As soon as you objectify it, you lost it. And it's very good at creating, you know, kind of these facsimiles of itself, you know, where you're looking, as you're, you know, focusing on your consciousness, your witness, you always inadvertently, you're going to turn and say, well, who is this witness, you know, that's witnessing whatever, my breath or my meditation mantra or whatever your technique is, who is observing it? And as soon as you start to observe the observer, right, you make that observer an object. You have separated, and it's basically the ultimate continuous witness consciousness, right, which cannot be objectified. So you can't pin it down, you know, and that's the trick. And that's, we talked about the game of hide and seek, you know. Consciousness is playing this game, you know. It's originally it's unmanifested, and then it becomes manifested into this multitude of names and forms, and you know, the whole inexhaustible mystery of life, the colors and the sounds and everything that we experience through the senses, but even more, because the senses are limited, and that is just how it just blows up and manifests that way. But in its original state, it's what the Buddhists call the void, right? The void, shunyam, they call it, and the Hindus say Purnam. Purnam is the fullness of the experience, you know, and we're not able to experience that fullness.
Why do you think we lose track of that? Like, is that part of the game of life? Is that we have to keep coming back? It's just one big, like, meditative cycle, or have we just lost our way?
So I mean, you can say or argue that it's done on purpose, because, you know, if we all knew our true self, we would not know it, right? You can only know it by not being it. You have to be apart from it. So everything is known by its opposite. That's why, you know, in every spiritual tradition, whether it's religious or philosophical, there is always that dichotomy, like the Tao, you know, the Taoists talk about the yin and yang. So you know something, you seek peace because you know despair, you know unpeace, you know chaos.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's that kind of thing. You will seek peace or consciousness because you're so familiar with non-bliss, the experience of the opposite. And so, you know, the idea is to come back to it, but in some ways, the whole, you know, our wish to search for it, you know, our desire to know who we are implies that we have the experience of it. And because if we had not and so we have this little knowledge of it somewhere, in, these magical moments when you're looking at the stars, when you're looking at the ocean, the sunset, looking at animals, or a newborn baby, in magical moments, there is an inkling of it, you recognize there's something greater.
Yeah.
And that recognition is what makes us search, for something deeper in life. But this search implies that we already have it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have this half knowledge that eventually will mature into full clarity, illumination.
Mm-hmm. You mean eventually throughout our lifetime or throughout other lifetimes? Like, do you think that this is a reincarnation thing where all the work that we put in this life, we may become more self-realized in the next?
So in this lifetime and in other lifetimes, I mean, it's both. We always have a chance to approach that state of oneness, even though we have the mind. The mind is supposed to distract you. That's the job of the mind. Some people say the job of the mind is to think and to analyze and to, criticize. But the job of the mind in this case is really to distract you from knowing the self. And that's why it's known as the game, right? Because why are we doing this? We're just masochistic, and it's like some kind of cosmic masochism that we're all of us performing, and like we just like to suffer. We don't want to know what bliss is, but that's, again, so it's that dichotomy. You want to know what the opposite is by first experiencing the pain. That's why, like the Buddha obviously said, the first principle, noble truth, is life is suffering, right? So life is suffering. And that's if you accept this fact that life is suffering, or life is difficult, and it's supposed to be difficult, and you're going to come across a bunch of obstacles in your life, then it becomes a little bit less difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're not surprised by the difficulties. You're expecting that at some point, you might have an obstacle or a challenge, and you prepare for it by understanding that you are not just that. You're not just this physical, limited being.
Yeah, not separate from
put through the suffering for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
This is a cleansing, a sort of cleansing that you go through, cleansing of your ego, cleansing of your mind, until the mind is calm. And that's why we meditate, to make the mind calm. The mind is calm to see or to reflect that which is deeper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a saying, I mean, this is pretty much in all the literature, is like separateness is suffering, and any kind of all of the suffering that we come to, or our perceived suffering, it stems from our own perception of our separateness to this world. But once you realize we are, our own unity, it's not really suffering.
Exactly. And
that's pretty much what it is.
From that separateness. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Or identification with the wrong thing. We identify with that which is limited, and we think that's who we are, but we're so much greater than this individual self.
Mm-hmm.
Individual self is just a bleep, it's just a little bleep in existence.
Mm-hmm.
But the yogis maintain that, we are not born. The body's born, but we are that consciousness which has never been born, which was unmanifested at first, and you will return to that unmanifested state after the physical death of the body. And then you will carry with you certain aspects of your individual soul, or what they call Atman, right? Atman literally means, At means breath. Man is either man or mind, right? Breathing in. So it's when you are, the essential part of yourself is Atman, right? So the true, authentic spiritual self is Atman. Everything else, any other self that you call self, is basically an object. Atman, that which is the authentic subject that looks out. You can't look at it, like what we were talking about.
So Atman is the witness?
Atman is the ultimate witness, yeah. You can't witness it.
You can't witness the witness.
Not the ultimate witness, no. You can use the prefrontal cortex of your brain, what's known as the buddhi, right? Buddhi. Buddhi is the intelligence of the mind that's able to self-analyze, be self-aware, basically the prefrontal cortex, which developed not that long ago as a species. And that is a witness as well, but that's not the true self. That is, you know, a replica in a way. It's not the full thing, you know, it's just part of the mind, but it's mirroring the self in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
You're using that witness, your prefrontal cortex, the buddhi, this discerning intellect, discerning intelligence, to make the mind calm, to make the right choices, you know, not drink too much, not eat too much, not, you know, all the different, you know, precepts and practices that we do. That's coming from the buddhi, right? The smarter part of ourselves, not the limbic brain, not the more egoic, you know, animalistic tendencies, but the higher part of the brain, which is reflecting the deeper, you know, self. And using that, we're able to understand what we are. And it's using that part of the brain or the mind that all these books of knowledge have been written, the Vedas and Upanishads and in other traditions as well. You know, even the science, you know, science, you can say, is in some ways a truth or form of truth that is unarguable, right? Not all science, of course. Science is always inquisitive, right? It's an inquiry. But some scientific knowledge is also kind of like downloaded, or as they call revealed, right? So before the word download, in the olden days, they used the word reveal, revelation. Something that comes through you. In Sanskrit, they use the word shruti. Shruti, it's S-H-R-U-T-I. Shruti means that which is heard, right? Shruti is, so it's not something that you learn or remember. It's something that comes through you like a channel.
It's like a transmission.
And so these books of knowledge, like the Vedas, the Upanishads, they are considered to be in the realm of Shruti. So these were revealed to meditators, you know, 5,000-6,000 years ago, or maybe even not that long ago, maybe 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, when they were present to their, you know, consciousness, their self, the Atman. And the Atman will, you know, kind of like a light, you know, shining and illuminating an object. You know, you can't, if there's no light, you can't see the object. And you can only see your hand if there's light shining on it. As soon as I take my hand, it's just space. But the light is still shining through the space. You just can't see the light. You only see the light when I put my hand up. Right? So the light of the self, this authentic self, the Atman, is always shining. And as soon as it's falling onto the witnessing consciousness of your mind, you know, that's calm and steady, then it's able to reflect that light. Then we perceive that there's something greater. There's something else there, greater than just this body mind. And
that's what the world needs more of right now, is that revelation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so these revelations came through. Yeah. And they're, you know, people are always downloading and
yeah. So where did they, do you think these sages came up with it? Just through meditation, like just literally just stilling the mind, and these are just revelations that come through, is what you're saying?
Pretty much. I mean, so nature, you know, Mother Nature is the original teacher.
Yeah.
All of this knowledge is out in nature. If you observe nature, you very quickly realize that it's impermanent, right? It's always changing. There is a principle that is not changing. There is something that is always the same. And so it's just by observing the natural phenomena, meditating on, contemplating on the natural phenomena, that they came to realize these things. Yeah. I mean, so we don't really know exactly, you know, who was like the original teacher or sage. You know, we know that the first writings of this happened about 5,000 years ago. So the Vedas, right, the books of knowledge, Vedas, have been written about 5,000 years ago. Rig Veda is the oldest one. It's RG Veda. Rig Veda. And these are, songs and poems. They're basically just kind of inspired renderings of poetic minds. They're not really like commandments of priests, do this, don't do that.
Yeah.
They didn't contain any of that dogma. They
Mm-hmm.
mostly just were outpourings of this, realization at the beauty, the mystery of life, the endless universe, the immensity of universe as they contemplated on nature. Those were the realizations. And so at first, they were probably not, as deep, as we know them. And also a lot of them might have been lost. What we have might be only like 1% of what there was.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't written down. They were just orally transmitted from person to person, from teacher to student. And there's no way to record them. They didn't write things down. They memorized. They had incredible memory. So they memorized all of these lengthy passages, and they would add and subtract. I'm sure they would play around with the content, and they get deeper and deeper into it. And what we finally, whoever wrote it down, didn't put their name on it, because probably it wasn't the teacher who wrote it down. It was probably a scribe. You know how kings in the olden days had scribes?
Yep.
And so there was probably someone who was who knew enough Sanskrit, or who was very well versed in writing, which was new at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Was able to write down some of these, kernels of wisdom, pearls of wisdom, and then that developed over time. So when we talk about the Vedas, we don't talk about like a single, book like Bhagavad Gita. We don't even talk about it as a series of books. The Vedas are really, they were written over centuries, if not thousands of years, so it's a whole style of writing, poetic at the same time, because a lot of it is rhyme, and also philosophical. And so some of them are not necessarily philosophical. Some of them are practical. How do you make food? How do you dress? What is the proper etiquette? So things like that. And then, they talk about relationships between people, relationships between kingdoms, the 4 caste system, that was introduced in the Vedas. We know about the caste system from the Vedas originally. And that spread, that was not just in India, or India wasn't India at the time, the Indus River Valley, where all of that developed. Obviously people traveled, merchants traveled at the time, and they took that knowledge all around. They went up to Persia, and we know a lot of Sufism. Sufis have been influenced by this knowledge as well. There's a lot of echoing, across cultures of the same ideas, the same depth of knowledge. Of course, Buddhism, the Buddha was from that part of the world, and he never went over to Asia, to Southeast Asia, where Buddhism is so huge right now. He was from India, from northern India. So again, this is kind of like the birthplace that we know of. People ask, well, where does it come from? Like, where did these people learn, and why did it happen? Well, first they had economic comfort, right? They had plenty of food. They didn't have to worry about hunting and gathering. They had comfortable lives, and this tradition lasted for so long that they really boiled down, the most, the brightest and the deepest truths from all the immensity of everything that was going on at the time. So I'm sure there was a lot of empty talk, just like we do now, just hanging out under a tree and, and talking about this and that. But what we know as the Vedas, it's really just boiled down, the essential teachings.
And it's pretty much, it's like is it like an enormous guidebook of how to live your life? Is it less so like a set of rules of, traditional Western religion? It's more so of just like a guidebook of how to be happy, essentially.
I mean, so you can say that, you can find that, they can be interpreted multiple ways. It's not really a guidebook. It's just poems and hymns. So the Vedas, usually they have 4 different parts to them. So there's 4 Vedas, and with 4 Vedas, and within those 4 Vedas, there's 4 different parts. Upanishads is the last part.
Mm-hmm.
So the first part is known as Brahmanas, right? Brahmanas are these kind of almost religious songs, and of different divine names, different mantras. Then there's something known as Aranyakas. Aranyakas are usually translated as forest texts because they were written in, by hermits, and different seekers in the forest mm-hmm. hermitages, they would go out and find a teacher, and then some of them were skilled enough to write, so they would write these down or memorize and, transmit orally. And then the final part of it are the Upanishads. And Upanishad means, so typically they translate Upanishad as sitting at the master's feet, right? So because mm-hmm. they literally sit around a tree or, a cave or something like that, somewhere in the forest, and they would gather up and listen to someone talk about the nature of consciousness or the nature of the universe or astrology, whatever, different things, different fields of knowledge. And so Upanishads are known as the end of the Vedas, right? Mm-hmm. They're the final part of the Vedas. And that's why we have the word Vedanta, right? Because Veda, we know Veda means knowledge, Anta means end, the end of knowledge. So they're the ending chapter of this wisdom. And it's really just in the Upanishads that these, like you said, life principles, how to live your life, that's where you find that, mm-hmm. in previous parts, like the Brahmanas, the Puranas, the Aranyakas, you don't. That's mostly just kind of rituals, sacrificial rites, hymns, mantras, things like that. So, but the Upanishads actually contain discourses between teacher and student, mm-hmm. or father and son, the son who went away and studied for 12 years, and then he came back, and the father would talk to him. What did you find out? What did you learn? And so and then through that conversation, you understand, right, deeper and deeper meaning of what they're talking about. And usually it is about the nature of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've noticed the Upanishads, they pretty much all around the same topic, even though it's all different speakers. It's all,
yeah,
where we are. There's the material world, and then there's the other world, and it's pretty much we live in 2 worlds, and
right.
Don't get too attached.
Yeah. They talk a lot about Brahman.
Yep, Brahman. That's what we all are.
Underlying reality. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's, Upanishads was basically where the original Vedanta.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's expanded beyond the Upanishads, but originally that's what we know as Vedanta philosophy, the end of the Vedas, sometimes called Advaita Vedanta, because Brahman is the non-dual principle, right? The one behind all, whether you see it or you don't. So things that exist that you can look at and you can objectify, and things, and the subject, right? The subject that always looks out.
Mm-hmm.
Which is Brahman. And Brahman mm-hmm. uses basically a magic trick to create this mirage of a reality that you're looking at. And as you look at it, you think it's real because you're using, that which is not real to see that which is not real. So you're in this non-real reality, kind of like a dream. When you're dreaming, yeah. and you're participating in your dream, you think that's real. You get, your heart starts beating fast, things happen in your dream very vividly. But when you wake up, you realize that was just a dream.
Mm-hmm.
In the dream, you're not in the dream, right? Your body's lying down. You're in bed sleeping. You're projecting that reality. So in the same way, Brahman consciousness, the witness consciousness, projects this world using this function of Maya. Maya is the illusion. And so, according to this philosophy, everything is an illusion, including the mind. The mind is also an illusion, which is, it's a hard concept to grasp by the mind, because we're using the mind to grasp this concept. So it's, we go in circles like this. And that's why 5,000 years ago they were talking about it, and we're still talking about it now. We'll always be talking about it, because there is no way to arrive at the truth by talking about it.
Exactly, just by stilling. And I think it's very interesting, like you said, we're still talking about it now, but people are putting it in more of a way of, like, this reality is a simulation. That's pretty much, they figured that out thousands of years ago.
Right.
And we're just like, people just have a different way of looking at it now, but it's the same concept. It's always been a simulation.
It has always been a simulation, exactly. To play the game of hide and seek, hide the true self, see if you can find it.
Mm-hmm.
And come up with all sorts of obstacles on the way, and so that you get knocked around by these obstacles until you say, all right, I've had enough of this. I know there's something deeper in me,
Mm-hmm.
start the journey of that search. Eventually
Mm-hmm.
you come back to yourself. So, kind of go in a circle and come back to where you started.
Mm-hmm.
But that's, that's kind of like the journey of the hero, like what Joseph Campbell talks about in his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. It says quintessential, journey of any hero in any myth or any story is you discover something that makes your current life impossible. So you have to basically jump out and search for some truth or fix something, whether it's within yourself or with your immediate environment. Eventually you come around, you become transformed, and through this journey you become transformed, and you come back to where you started, but you're a different person. You're at a different level of consciousness, of spiritual evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you can say that maybe we are kind of spiraling around this one same spot, getting a little bit more and more evolved, although looking at the world right now, it's hard to make that case, right?
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think in some ways people were more evolved back then.
Mm-hmm.
And have all the distractions that we have come up with.
Mm-hmm.
There's also an argument that all the technology that we're able to create, right, we're using our minds to create technology, and the mind is limited. So our technology will always have a limit. As far as our minds are limited, that would be the limit of our technology. But in the same way, our minds are actually capable of doing just that without the technology.
Mm-hmm.
Right? All these, speaking across distance, remote viewing, like psychic conversations, visualizations and things like that. These are all innate qualities of the mind, and we have switched them up for technology.
Mm-hmm.
And deadened or numbed our own innate sense of those qualities or senses that we have, the extra sensory perception that we all have. The minds are capable of that. Using technology, we've numbed that part of ourselves. That seems to be happening more. Back then, 2,000-3,000 years ago, before we had the TVs and internet and radios and cell phones, you had to develop some of those qualities. Like I said, they had incredible memory. They could commit to memory, hours and hours, if not days, of precise poetic renderings, Yeah. And this was across the board. Who knows what other skills and powers they possessed. We only know from scriptures, like the sutras, yoga sutras, they talk about a whole lineup of different powers that you can gain through meditative practices, including levitation, and knowing the entire anatomy of the body and the anatomy of the universe just by meditating. That, so it's curious, that we've lost touch with that part of ourselves, and we're kind of on the way of losing more and more of that.
Yeah, it's like as we become more connected to each other, we become more disconnected from ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
I think about Neuralink and Elon Musk, how he wants to hook up our brains to computers pretty much. I actually think that the advent of that technology is going to bring about I mean, or has the potential to bring about some things that we talked about, like, you know, psychic abilities and being able to reach deeper into our mind at will, rather than taking us away from it. But I mean, it could be used for nefarious purposes as well. But I think we'll be like, that's actually one thing that he said, that we're going to be able to hook up and communicate without talking, which is, that is just doesn't even make any sense. But I think our next evolutionary step, you know, ideally in a perfect world, is that we hook up to computers, and that enables us to go deeper inside of our minds and deeper inside of ourselves, so that we can access that and use it for the right ways, and so we don't have to, you know, go through these crazy yogic adventures that we put ourselves through, and
Yeah.
actually make it a lot easier and more accessible to the population and more people.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah. That sounds very Elon Muskish. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
I mean, I think there is some validity to that, but again, there's going to be a ceiling to that. You know,
Mm,
not going to be able to pass that which is unknowable, right?
mm,
Some things are just not knowable by the mind. The mind has limits. So, and no matter how hard you educate yourself, or expose yourself to different ideas, it doesn't really matter. No matter how far you can progress in your technology, it's going to hit a ceiling of the mind's own limitations. The mind,
mm,
and because the mind is limited by the senses, right? So the mind is composed of the senses. Everything you've seen, heard, touched, tasted, smelled, and perceived otherwise, or inferred otherwise, has a limit. You can't see everything. You don't see every color out there. You don't hear every sound out there. Like I give the example in my teacher trainings, a dog can smell a drop of blood in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, right? A dog
mm,
can smell that. We can't smell a drop of blood in a glass of water. So
mm,
our perception of the world is very limited through our senses.
mm,
When the dog goes outside, they can understand the world in a way that we could never understand. We just
mm,
have that capability. And that's true for every sense. So what we are understanding, what is actually out there, is not what we're looking at.
mm,
What you're looking at and what you're hearing is just a fraction of reality, right?
mm,
And so because of that, we are always going to be limited in our tools, because we're not building the right tools to really understand what the world is. We can't see. It's like you're in a dark room and you just have this little narrow spotlight. You're just searching within that spotlight. You don't
yeah.
realize that there's this whole giant cave around you that's always going to be unseen.
Mm,
And so unless you know the self is that cave, the self is that expansive existence.
yeah. And the
And
self is really
and,
unknowable.
and the search is always going to continue. The
Hmm.
self is unknowable through the mind. The
Yeah.
search is always going to continue because we have a fraction of it. We're holding on to a fraction.
Mm,
Wish to attain it means that we are it, but not through the mind. The mind is the wrong tool. All
mm,
digital technology, all the other tools, microscopes, telescopes, all of that is always going to be limited because we're still looking at a very narrow spotlight of what is out there.
mm,
And we can't talk about it, because there's no way to understand it through words or thoughts.
mm,
But there is a way to know it, to be it. And the way is presence, right? Presence as in meditative practices in Buddhism, kind of mindfulness to this present moment, right? Moment to moment. Or in the yogic traditions, it's focusing on an object, something that's uplifting, something that's inspiring to you, whether it's a meaningful word like a mantra, whether it's your breath, which of course is meaningful because it sustains you with life, right? You have to breathe. Or visualization, right? So like a light in the heart center, everyone has a heart center, everyone has the third eye. So visualizing or doing mantra or doing any kind of form of meditation eventually makes you realize the truth.
mm. Was there a moment in your life where you, like, or was it a gradual thing where you realized the truth? Like, was there something where something clicked and you're like, oh, I am actually everything. I am all of this. And, this is just materialism isn't real, and the real self lies beyond it all? Or is it more of just like a gradual thing and gradual?
So
Um,
Yeah, I am one of those who did not have, a spiritual awakening like Eckhart Tolle or
Mm-hmm.
Ramana Maharshi, one of the, the great teachers out there. For me, and I think like for most of us, this realization has always been there. It's always kind of lurking, and I can sense it.
Mm-hmm.
I look at it. I cannot directly approach it, but I have a feeling of it, and we all do. We all have a sense of it. And of course, the more critical the mind is, the more difficult it is to sense that lurking, sense of your own immensity. And so for me, that was early on because I grew up in a household of my dad practicing yoga and doing meditation, and my parents very open to that, even though I grew up in the Soviet Union, Soviet system, which was not very popular, but my parents were kind of exceptional in that sense.
Mm.
So I was open to that from very early age. And when I came to America, it was just step by step, it's a kind of gradual. And now, I have a meditation practice that I love, it's my source of everything, every morning, where I draw and just, really a lot of it is just being still,
Mm-hmm.
just being still. I always talk to my students and say, even if you don't meditate, just take a minute every day to be still.
Mm-hmm.
We are so busy, even just physically, like our hands are busy. We're always fidgeting.
Mm-hmm.
Our knees are, twittering. Our eyelids are busy. Our eye muscles are so busy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that busyness dissipates our energy, right? We waste a lot of energy that we naturally generate. I mean, we know from science that ATP, what is it called? Adenosine triphosphate, right? Which is the energy molecule that your mitochondria makes. We make our body weight in ATP every day just to be alive, right?
Oh yeah.
We make our own body weight in ATP
Wow.
every single day. And so we're these gigantic energy generators. We create a lot of more than an atomic bomb. But we're losing most of that energy, either
Mm.
physically by fidgeting and moving. And movement, of course, is life. Movement is good. But this extraneous movement, this erratic movement, and then of course the mind is such a busy drunken monkey bitten by a scorpion, as they say. That's when we lose a lot of that energy. And so just finding a moment of stillness, it's a simple practice. You can do it anywhere. You just need a minute.
Mm-hmm.
You're physically comfortable. That's step one. Step two, relax yourself into stillness. Relax your hands, your jaw, all facial muscles, the eyes especially, and just be there. Be there.
Mm-hmm.
It's like who said, "Be still and know that I am," right? That's from the Bible. So
Yeah.
yeah, and that, of course, the Bible came out of the Vedas, right? We don't think of it that way, but Christian tradition came out of these more ancient traditions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Influenced.
they don't tell you that in church though.
They don't, because they don't really know it. They don't
Yeah.
question that. Where did this wisdom come from? The wisdom came from the East, and it precedes the Bible and Christianity by several thousand years.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the principles, like we know from the Yoga Sutras, right? We talk about the 8 limbs of yoga and the yamas and the niyamas, the do's and the don'ts. They mirror commandments almost
Mm-hmm.
word for word.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they were written 400 years before Christianity came about. So this is more ancient, but the wording is the same. The practices are similar. It's not dogmatic, right? It's not sinful to commit, against those principles. In yoga, it's more experiential, right?
Mm-hmm.
You break one of those rules, don't steal, that kind of thing. What they say is that's going to disturb your mind, right? It's not a sin, and there's guilt that goes with it. In yoga, we don't look at that. We just look at, okay, if you have stolen, if you have been, harmful in some way, then that's going to disturb your peace of mind. And
Yep.
what we want is that calm intellect to
Mm-hmm.
reflect the shining self, right? Just like that light is shining. If your intellect is busy with thoughts, it's all distorted, then you don't see, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get mixed up with that. You identify only with that which is reflected, which is all distorted.
Mm-hmm.
And
I like to look at Christianity in a yogic sense, and like, you know, how you said it's not a sin, but it's like I like to look at it and say that heaven and hell is right now. It's on earth and it's in the mind. So if you do, you know, if you do commit a sin, you may live in the hell of your mind in a way.
yeah, it's completely metaphorical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's absolutely. The Bible is an incredible, metaphorical collection of stories, metaphorical stories that exactly that. That's exactly, you can be in heaven or you can be in hell right now. It depends on how you see the world.
Yeah, it's all perspective.
It's all that perspective. Yeah. And that's what yogic practices are for, is to really adjust your lens, adjust your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
That you're able to handle the challenges better, you're able to deal with stress that comes at you, and it will. That's what life is about, because that's the whole point of it. If you don't have any stress and you don't have any obstacles, how are you going to learn? How are you going to seek bliss?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to seek that which is deeper than your everyday consciousness, ordinary consciousness that we're running on.
Mm-hmm.
In order to seek something deeper, you have to kind of bump your head against the wall a few times until you say, I've had enough of this. I want every spiritual giant out there, they've had major obstacles in their lives. Every one of them has had to deal with kind of this, what am I to do? I mean, that same Eckhart Tolle, he like hated himself, according to in his own words. He wanted to commit suicide when he was like 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
That's a sad way of living, but in some ways he just wanted to get out of his skin. He wanted to jump out of his everyday ordinary existence to find something greater. And he didn't have the training, the yogic training. To him it just happened in a snap because he was done with it.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I think that's possible for everybody. It's just like we talked about before, it just comes down to perspective. It's people look at it, their sufferings, and they look at their trials and tribulations, and they say, woe was me, and they just keep getting caught in that cycle. But if you take those, and like you said, you learn from those, that's when you can culminate and cultivate a better and happier life.
Totally.
And that's what it's about.
Yeah, that's what it's about. Absolutely.
Do you think that's what life is about? Because the first thing that you ever asked me was, what is the meaning of life, and what is the purpose of yoga? I'm going to ask you that question.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I answered that in the training.
You probably did. I just don't remember your answer.
I mean, so yoga has many meanings. The traditional meaning of yoga is that it's union, right, of that our individual self to that which is the deeper self, the Atman, right, or
Mm-hmm.
Brahman. Brahman is Atman, but it's represented. So Brahman, right, is consciousness, right? So that's the definition of Brahman. In fact, Brahman is that which expands, because the root word BRH is to grow, to expand, to burgeon, to give birth, and I think maybe some of those English words come from that same root. And that is the ultimate principle of the universe, which is represented in an individual, in a person, as Atman, right? So Atman is part of Brahman, and it's just individualized in this particular manifestation. That's the deepest part of you. That's the most authentic part of you. And yoga is connecting to that, right? So yoga is that yoking or union with that. And
it means union, literally, right?
It literally means union or yoking, or even the word junction comes from that yoke, yoga. Because English, borrows a lot from Sanskrit. Most Indo-European languages come from Sanskrit or a derivative of Sanskrit, whatever was earlier, and that's true for all European languages, Slavic languages, Persian, Iranian dialects, all of that just kind of came out of Sanskrit. So that's why we have root words that are so similar to Sanskrit, a lot of these different languages. And the meaning of life, I mean, we make it. My answer really is we make the meaning of life. To be a good person, We know that you need to do two things to be a good person. To be a good person, meaning that you feel fulfilled, right? You feel no matter what happens, you feel like you've lived a good life, you've contributed, right? And that's basically where the core is contribution. So you want to be able to grow. That's the first thing. Grow, develop, advance, whether it's, physically or spiritually advance, and use your knowledge, use your physical energy to help others, right? So some kind of contribution. The growth, individual growth gives us fulfillment, and societal contribution gives us incredible fulfillment. So those two have to exist. And, just kind of across the board, that's kind of the general, I talk about the old story of a teacher, shining a light with a mirror, right? So catching a little ray of light with a mirror and directing it to the student and saying, do you see how I can catch my light with this mirror and direct it to her face? And, the answer is, well, the meaning of life is twofold, right? It's to gather the light and to take it to where it's needed, right? That light that you've gathered to someone who needs the light. Then your life becomes meaningful. Then it becomes a fulfilled life. Otherwise, it's just biological existence that's self-focused, and that doesn't provide that same satisfaction. So, and again, these are just philosophical, I'm just meandering here because we don't really know, right? We make our own purpose. So, they talk about dharma. Dharma is your individual life purpose. That's a big concept throughout Asia in general, not just in Indian, yogic India, but also more in the Southeast Asia. Dharma is the way, right? The way of life, the way of practicing what you're meant to do. And if you don't practice it, they say you will not be fulfilled, right? So one of the goals of your life is to find your dharma, known as svadharma. Sva means your own. Just like in Russian, the word svaya means your own dharma. And really follow it to the fullest. If you don't, you will be miserable. You'll always wander. It's like Thoreau said, men live lives of quiet desperation, right? Henry David Thoreau in his Walden book. At the very beginning, somewhere in the beginning, he says, men live lives of quiet desperation. Why? Because we don't follow our own dharma. We don't ask the question. That question gets suppressed somewhere in childhood. One of our, adult supervised teachers, parents, peers, whoever gives you that, ridiculous idea that whatever you really love is stupid. And, that's going to be a waste of your time, go do something productive. And get this idea into your head, and that basically suppresses your search. And that could be suppressed for the rest of your life. And people get really depressed about that. Knowingly or unknowingly depressed. They're always searching, and they could be financially successful, but they'll still be miserable because they're not following their path. How do you know your path, right? People always ask, I know some of you guys ask the same question in the training. How do you follow your path? How do you know what your path is? So your path bubbles up, kind of like a spring, right? It comes forth within you when you're young, but also throughout your life, because it is your path. Right? So it's going to come up just like a bubbling spring. And there are going to be echoes of this throughout your life. So it takes time to listen. I think that's why meditation is so helpful too, because it's in those quiet moments that you discover what your natural affinity is, what your inclination, what are your tendencies. Look at your life like, where are you born? What languages do you speak? What's your physical makeup? What is your emotional and mental makeup? So depending on all of these things, you can get a directive. Like, I am 6'5" and I like balls. Well, you're probably going to be good at basketball, So, and in that sense, if you speak a specific language, or if you come from a specific culture, it's probably very likely that your dharma has to do with that culture. None, as they say in spiritual circles, nothing happens for no reason, right? There's a reason for everything. See it, but there is a plan. right? There is that divine principle, Brahman, that guides us, right, through life. And, there is a plan there, and being attuned to that plan uh, is very important. And also just reading what's like smack right in front of you. It's what is your personality like? Where are you born? What are your physical and mental attributes?
Mm.
Do you like to draw? Do you like to write? Do you like to sing? Do you like to dance? Usually it has to do with something creative, right? We're all creative beings.
Mm-hmm.
It's, someone's dharma is probably not, um, you know, counting money, right?
Yeah,
Like
being
that.
an accountant or something.
Yeah, being an accountant, it's probably not that. It's
Mm-hmm.
something creative, so being a creator, because we are a creator, right? So that Brahman is the creative principle of the universe, and we are it,
Mm-hmm.
right? We may not feel it, but just intellectually we understand that that's what we are.
Mm.
So the creation aspect is huge, and that's where your dharma is. But the question is, what are you creating? What do you want to create?
Mm.
How do you contribute to the lives of others in a meaningful way? How do you grow yourself and elevate yourself? And what is it that you want to create? What are you naturally drawn to?
Mm-hmm. What's your dharma?
I think it's teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, teaching has been, and dharma changes too. Teaching has been kind of I don't want to say an easy path, for me. It's something that I'm naturally inclined. I love it. I feel that I'm able to explain complicated concepts in a way that is discernible for most people.
Mm.
Sometimes when I teach a class, and people will talk to me afterwards and say, you were talking about these things, and it was so interesting. But when somebody asked me afterwards what we talked about, I couldn't explain it. I was yeah, it was all interesting, but how do you present that to someone?
Mm.
So these concepts, these kind of metaphysical, philosophical concepts, are, I think, difficult to conceptualize, and especially, to have a conversation about
Mm-hmm.
a way that's progressively, understood. And I find that I've always had an easy time with it, easier
Mm.
than most. So, yeah, even in Russian, because I grew up in the Soviet Union, and I remember when I was a kid, I wanted to become a ninja. Like most kids do. You watch a movie, and I was very physical because I was a gymnast, so I could do flips and all that, walk on my hands, and I was in a crowd of kids kind of like me, and would run around and pretend to be ninjas. And at the end of it, and this was usually in the summer, because I grew up in Siberia. It's cold in the winter, so we would be out in the summer until late hours, and we would go into a park. And at the end of the night, we would sit down, and I would say, I would be like, okay, we're gonna meditate now. And I was probably like 12 or something like that, and I had no idea. We'd say, okay, we're gonna sit down cross-legged in a circle, and we're just gonna breathe, and meditate. And this is something that I was doing when I was 12 back in
Mm.
Syria, and I wasn't learning from anyone. I mean, I saw my dad doing that, but I never took his class. I just saw, they're doing it. They're adults.
Mm.
For that, I never thought this was going to be for me. This was just a natural thing for me.
Mm. Yeah, I think I noticed that in your book. I actually just finished reading your book yesterday, which was I didn't actually do that on purpose. It just so happened to be, and I noticed the way that you put these very profound topics is just very simple. Like anybody could read your book and just be like, oh, okay. And because not everybody could read the Upanishads or the Bhagavad Gita and really take it all in and really internalize that. But if you put it in a simple way, you can kind of like you can spark something in people's
That's good.
in mind.
Great to hear.
I love the last paragraph too. I'm not the last story that you have of this moment, and how you said, how do I put this the right way? You could probably put it a lot better than me, obviously. It was, you don't remember the moments in your life that you're caught in either in the past or the future. You remember the moments, like the very fond memories that you have in life are the ones that you're just totally engrossed in the moment when you're walking on the beach or you're in the woods or, you're playing with friends or something like that. That is the moments that you remember. And then I closed the book and I was at the beach I closed the book, and I fully took in the moment. I was like, wow, I'm gonna remember this moment. Like I fully became engrossed in that, and it was a very, I never really thought about that. Like the memories that we have, it's not the times when we're thinking about the past or the future. It's just it's fully being engrossed in the moment.
Right.
And you
Yeah.
put it so simply. It was great.
Yeah. There's those intense moments that sometimes force you to be present, right? Because something happens, right? You
Mm-hmm.
spill coffee all over yourself, right? You're gonna remember that because it's like, whoa, like it just shocks you, you know.
Yeah.
Or when you are on purpose, you know, like you said, when you're on the beach and you're looking at the waves and you're just taking in the whole scenery, those moments will stay with you. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
not the days you have lived, but the days you remember, the moments you remember.
Yeah.
That's definitely true. Yeah.
It was awesome. It was awesome.
And so, you know, another kind of idea here that I like to talk about in terms of consciousness, you know, just for people to kind of understand what consciousness is and what is this conscious principle.
Mm-hmm.
Really just the underlying sense of existence, right? So, you know, I find that this is the most difficult concept for people to come around because we're using our limited mind. We've established that, you know, the spotlight view. And so, you know, like water, right? Water can take many different shapes, right? Could be ice, could be vapor, could be waves in the ocean. And I give that example, you know, waves rolling to the shore. And if the waves had consciousness, right? And one of them said, well, what are we doing? And so, well, we're rolling around. It was like, oh, I like the way I'm rolling, right? I like my bubbles and look how I'm sparkling in the sun. And where we're all going? Well, we're going to go over there. We're going to go to the shore. What's going to happen to the shore? We're going to crash. We're going to crash into the rocks.
Mm-hmm.
Then what? Well, we're waves. We're going to disappear, of course. Oh my God, but what's going to happen to my sparkling bubbles? Well, it's going to be gone, you know? So, of course, that's how people are, right? We are attached to this name and form that we are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Attached to this particular body and mind. And that's our identification, right? This is where, from this identification stems our suffering, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our suffering comes from this particular, like the wave identifying with itself, and then it knows that it's going to crash.
Mm-hmm.
So we know, right? The body and mind knows that there's an end to this life. And we're so attached to this life that we're afraid of death. We're afraid of everything. And so the underlying substance of the wave, of course, is water, right? Water is not going anywhere. It's still part of the sea. It's still part of that same ocean, you know. And then another example, another teacher gives it, which I love, is gold, right? You can have a gold necklace. And what is a necklace? A necklace doesn't exist without the gold, right? A necklace is a shape of a certain object, you know, whatever, gold necklace, and we call it a necklace. Necklace is a name and form.
Mm-hmm.
But if you take away the gold, is there a necklace left? No, nothing, right? You can melt this gold necklace and turn it into a bracelet, right? Or a ring. And now the name and form are gone. Now it's called a ring or it's called a bracelet. But the gold, the underlying essence of it is still there. The substance is still there. So we're the same way. Like, you know, we call ourselves what we call ourselves, you know, our name and form, you know, human being called this way and whatever we call ourselves and all the different descriptions that we give ourselves. And again, that is just a name and form. That's not the reality. The reality is something deeper than that, right? We are up and down, right? Up is life, down is death. But the down is not down. Down is just part of the same wave.
Yep.
You know, what is underneath the wave? What is that substance? That substance is consciousness. That's what we are. We are just like the golden object that can be melted into a different object. We are the same way. You know, we will change our form and continue as this essence, right? The consciousness.
Yep.
And so how do you know that? How do you feel that? You know, most people, I think, know this intrinsically. You know, if you don't think about it, if you just know what you are right now, just experience this present moment right now, there is an underlying presence there. right? So you can think about your name and form. You can look at yourself. You can look at your mind. You can kind of turn around, look at your own witness. But that which exists, right? I always give this example. When you were 5 years old, if I were to ask you, who are you? At 5 years old, you would give me your name and say, I'm a boy or I'm a girl, I'm this and that, you know. I said, no, 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 beyond that, deeper than what you're describing. Who are you inside, deep inside? Eventually, you would say, I don't know. You throw your hands up and you say, I don't know. I'm it's just me. It's just me.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're 25, I would ask you the same, and you say, I don't know. It's just me. The same, deep down, past all the descriptions. And when you're 85, it's just me, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same me. It's the same feeling of me, the experience of existence. Doesn't matter what age you are. And the cool thing is, it's the same for all of us. All 7.7 billion people on the planet that happen to be, you know, alive today, they all have this experience. It's just me. We're all, it's just me, because we're all the same Brahman consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
manifesting in different ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, that's just a simple way of understanding that, of knowing that, yes, we are that which is inexplicable, which is unborn, which is undying. And, you know, we move through the cycles of life and death to realize our truth eventually, to come back to that, to bump around, get ourselves knocked around, you know, with challenges in life. But eventually we realize that we are and have always been that consciousness.
Mm. It's a beautiful concept, isn't it?
It is. And in some ways, you know, what's happening in the world right now, a lot of people are worried, you know, with the whole coronavirus and, you know, government, political control, you know, everybody's, all the countries in the world turning slightly socialist, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of restrictions, a lot of our freedoms are taken away from us. And so people are, you know, obviously asking a lot of questions. But in the end, you know, if you have this perspective of consciousness, right, this is just, right, this is just a wave.
Yep. Just
Consciousness,
another ripple.
it's just another ripple. It's just, it doesn't really matter in the long run. I'm talking about outside of this life, this
Yeah.
one individual life. In the long run, we're all that, creating all sorts of different manifestations of what could be,
Mm-hmm.
of challenges that could be, as hard as they could be. You know, being born in Nazi Germany and being sent into some Soviet concentration camp. I mean, that's, you know, that's a far out game to play, you know, with your
Mm-hmm.
sadistic, you know, or masochistic tendency of nature, you know, putting yourselves through the mill to have these terrible experiences, so you can say, okay, I'm done. I want to wake up now,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But then again, so it's that, just having that knowledge that in the end it's okay, you know,
Mm-hmm.
underneath all that, it is okay. Our
Mm-hmm.
mind is subjected to the tumultuous, you know, experience, but underneath that is changeless. That does
Yeah.
not change. The consciousness, the experience of me existence, even if you find yourself starving, it's just me. That experience is the same.
Mm-hmm. It's all temporary. It's all impermanent, right?
It's impermanence of, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
It is. It is. And I wish everybody. Imagine how different the world would be if everybody knew that concept.
Yeah, I think it would be, I mean, you know, if it was taught, if it was
Mm.
taught, you know, at the appropriate age, you know, somewhere around, I'd say 18, 19, where, you know, people can grasp that, and maybe some preparation for that, you know, so say
Mm-hmm.
earlier on. And but of course, and so somewhere in the, I can't remember exactly where, I don't know if it's in the Vedas or the Upanishads, but it does say that at some point the world will embrace this philosophy.
Mm.
All nations of the world will embrace this philosophy.
What do you think that's going to take?
You know, we don't know, but it is happening. You know, it is happening.
It is. It's a slow process, but it is happening. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing so much turmoil in the world right now, but it's like you said, there's polar opposites. Like you have one side that you can look at and see just like, you know, insanity and just chaos. But then you have the other side where you have an awakening in the sense of where people are actually like are finding out, and people are finding yoga and alternative therapies, and, you know, people are doing podcasts and shows like this, and it is like a yin and yang thing. It's the opposites, and the more one intensifies, the more the other side intensifies.
Exactly. So there is a acceleration of this
Mm.
that's happening. So, I don't want to give you a long time frame because it could happen in just a decade,
Mm.
especially now, like how quickly we're able to change. A year ago, if you were told that the world is going to be like this, you would say that's impossible,
Yeah.
but, and this is not just here in America. I talked to my mom who's in Siberia, and what she's telling me is exactly the same what's happening here. I live in San Diego. What we have in San Diego is the same as what's happening in Siberia.
Mm.
I talked to her and she says, yeah, it's the same. People are wearing masks. Everybody's cautious, keeping their distance. It's the same kind of guideline, global. And we were able to change on a dime like that, not just like physical, but also like people are, they understand why this is important, or they're convinced by the media that it is important, globally. We've all bought into this, whether for good or bad. We've all been able to make this drastic change in our lives, which basically shows me that we're capable of changing as a, planetary society very quickly if there is need.
Mm-hmm.
There's a major need for something like this to happen.
Mm-hmm.
We will change very quickly.
Yeah.
This coronavirus experience only proves it.
Yeah, I think it's just the catalyst to it. This is
Yeah.
just the beginning. I mean, hopefully there's not much more catastrophes that'll happen like that, but sometimes it's almost like what we need in a way. Like humanity needs that wake up call in order to wake up.
It's leading us and hopefully in the right direction of awakening. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
hopefully.
then, at the same time though, awakening, all of us being awake at the same time is not going to be a world we want. So
why not?
Because then when you're awake and everybody's awake, you don't know it, right?
Oh, okay.
You only know it because if you have the bliss of the experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
The rupture of like, I have come out of this painful, this lockdown, not the lockdown we have, but this mental that we've put ourselves predicament of being only human, not spiritual, only physical being.
Mm-hmm.
And that is suffering, that is the hell that we're talking about, hell on earth. But the heaven can be also experienced right now, right here, right now.
Mm-hmm. The kingdom of heaven is within.
It's all within. It's that conscious perspective. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. What do we have for time? Hour and 15 minutes about? I think if you want to end it right there, Slava, I think that's a very good point to end it at.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, I mean, that's...
yeah, it was a pleasure talking to you. It was great.
Yeah. Awesome.
I think you should make your own videos and your own series and, your own teachings on stuff. I think you just, like you said before, the way that you explain things is just simple. And you have just an easy presence. Like you're... just like, and you can talk to anybody. I feel like anybody can listen to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's just a matter of doing it. I'd rather meditate or read a book or
yeah, I understand. Yeah.
It's yeah, I know. I've been told that a few times before. Yeah.
Well, if you need any help, you know who to call. I can help out.
Hey, yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right. Well, let me know if there's anything else. Like we can do this again. Obviously, if there's anything else, any other part of consciousness that we want to discuss,
Definitely. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
Awesome. It was great. Thank you.
Thanks, Slava. I will be in touch and, namaste.
Namaste.